Oh shit, dude. New Drukhari FAQ. Let's see what's in this bad boy. Oh. Where's the rest of it? What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and we've got a lot to talk about today. Drukhari have finally received their Codex FAQ, and it was really uninspiring, so that's not super exciting. But I also want to take the moment to talk about the competitive 40k metagame as it shakes out right now. We had a bunch of tournaments last weekend. That is the weekend of April 24th and 25th. I talked a little bit about one of them that was won by a Tyranid Harridan over on another video earlier this week. You can go check that out if you want me to talk in depth about Tyranid Harridans and how cool they can be. But we also had a million billion other GTs happen the same weekend, one of the first big weekends of competitive 40k for the entire year. Now that this global crisis is finally starting to unravel a little bit, and people are finally able to leave their houses and play some 40k in big groups with one another. So this is going to be a little bit more of a rambly video. I'm going to talk about some of the results from last weekend. I'm also going to talk a little bit about this Drukhari FAQ and what I think it means for the future of the game. So if you like this style of more rambly video, go ahead and drop a like, drop that subscribe, let me know down in the comments. It's all the YouTube stuff. You know the YouTube stuff. We do it all the time. You know, it's whatever. Also, tiny quick plug for the new store. There's a link down in the description, store.tactical-tortoise.com. We got some t-shirts and stuff over there as well. And you can buy Tactical Tortoise objective markers from 3D6 Wargaming now. So that's pretty cool. So I'll drop a link to that in the description as well. But anyway, let's talk about these tournament results. Now, I have a lot of hot takes on this channel, but one that I don't think is quite as hot anymore after watching the games from this past weekend is that the Drukhari faction is busted as hell and needs to be heavily nerfed. And that's because of their ridiculous overperformance in the absolute swathe of competitive events that we saw this past weekend. And while we were all hoping for those nerfs to come down in the form of this Drukhari FAQ, basically the only thing the FAQ actually addressed was the misprint in the English copy of the Codex that made Reaver jet bikes 10 points. Clearly, they were supposed to be 20. They were changed to 20 in the MFM and then reprinted as 10 in the Codex by accident. Almost every event released an event-specific FAQ that made them 20 points again. Now, I should preface this discussion a little bit by pointing out that I didn't, because I typically rule rules as written, and because the English copy of the latest publication is the golden version for any rules pertaining to that publication. As much as I didn't like it, the rules as written were that jet bikes were 10 points. But I also figured that this errata would come a lot sooner than it actually did, and we would only be saddled with 10-point Reaver jet bikes for a little while. Well, we finally got the FAQ, and that was the only real change in it. So, things like Dark Technomancers and their Flamers still works. Liquefiers getting +1 damage and +1 to wound for free with no chance to kill the models inside. The Razor's Edge combo still works as well, that Succubus being able to effectively quadruple the number of attacks she makes by flubbing all of her attacks on her first sequence, then doubling them and making them again. So, to our knowledge, that's all rules as intended, which is surprising. We also didn't see any more points changes, which I think people were expecting. I think, generally speaking, a 5 to 10 point across the board points increase is what people were hoping for from this errata, but that's not what we're getting. And I guess it's up to the community to figure out how to deal with this Drukhari menace in the long term. Now, that said, I do call it a menace because over the events this weekend, we saw some ridiculous overperformance from Drukhari, and that's with 20-point Reaver jet bikes being in place for basically all of these in-person tournaments. So let's get into some of the results from this past weekend and talk about exactly what happened. Now, looking online, the events that I could identify, there were 7 tournaments and GT level events. Those are 28 plus players and at least 5 rounds. And we did have some interesting developments. Obviously, I talked about the Harridan win, which is super impressive. Although a very Tyranid-conducive metagame, which typically helps. Tyranids tend to be a sort of upper mid-tier right now in the metagame, and if you do run into a meta that doesn't have a lot of the hard counters to Tyranids, they are absolutely the favorite to win the event. If you're not bringing answers to them, they will crush you, for sure. We also saw a win by pure Imperial Knights, which came kind of out of nowhere, but again, that's actually not too surprising in a Drukhari-dominated metagame, as we'll talk about a little bit later. But overall, the story of this weekend was one of barely contested Drukhari domination. While overall, Drukhari only represented about 5% of the overall population, they took 4 out of 9 undefeated spots. Almost half of all undefeated players were Drukhari players. Out of the 53 total spots in those 7 events, that went 4-1, meaning they only lost 1 of their games over the course of the weekend. 12 of those were Drukhari, almost 25%. In fact, at the Motor City Mayhem, an event that I commentated, I was invited by the Death or Glory team over to man the mics all weekend and had a really good time doing so. Highly recommend you go check those guys out. And the VODs of the event, I think we had some sweet commentators on there. Scary from Scarredcast, as well as Pablo from Frontline Gaming, both joined me, as well as Lyle from the Death or Glory team. And we had a good time talking about 40k all weekend. So a lot of content there if you want to go watch that. But that was the largest event this weekend with 109 players in total, and the single greatest concentration of skill, given that it was essentially a major event, meaning that there were the greatest number of ITC and BCP standings points available. Out of those 109 players, no Drukhari players had a losing record. Every single Drukhari player ended 3-2 or better, and obviously the event ended up being won by Brad Chester playing Drukhari with the highest overall score. Now, this is obviously pretty anecdotal. It's only one event, and I think there were only 6 Drukhari players, and it points mostly to experienced and enfranchised players picking up the faction this early because they've identified it as a real powerhouse. So their win rate is probably going to dip a little bit as less competent players pick up the faction. But it still points to a faction that doesn't require much skill or practice to do well with. Since those players have clearly just picked up this new codex and are still getting used to it, but can still put up a 3-2 record, that's very impressive for a codex that's only been out a couple weeks. It's also important to note that we're still working off early list archetypes that haven't really been refined yet. So at the top tables of the game, the most powerful Drukhari builds are likely to become even more consistent as people start trimming the fat off their lists, and we figure out exactly which units and combinations in the codex are the most powerful. So speaking of the power of Drukhari, let's talk for a moment about exactly what Drukhari do that is so powerful. Like a lot of busted stuff in 40k, the major problem with Drukhari is just their insurmountable efficiency. In order to be really powerful in 40k, generally speaking, you just have to have really good numbers on your datasheet for the points that you spend on those numbers. And that is one of the big problems with Drukhari. There are a couple combos that are definitely too strong in the codex. I talked about the Razor's Edge combo a little bit. I did have a video about that describing exactly how the combination works, or the interaction between Liquefier Guns and Dark Technomancers that I mentioned earlier. Those things alone don't really push the power level of the faction as a whole too far. The reason that Drukhari is good is because of math. If you look at the most common unit in the codex, Drukhari Raider is 85 points and can offer your army literally hundreds of points of utility between the damage that it deals, extra movement it provides to your units, protecting your units from damage by taking the hits for them, and that's representative of almost every unit in the codex having the same level of efficient output for their cost. This allows Drukhari to follow a mostly straightforward game plan of move your units forward, charge your enemy units, and then initiate a series of peace trades that most factions in the game can't possibly hope to get out ahead of. As you wipe their units out trivially with combinations of units that are 40 to 50% less than their points cost. Now, that's not to say that the faction is literally unbeatable. Drukhari obviously have some bad matchups, and we're already starting to see some shifts in builds in the metagame to compensate for that Drukhari matchup. One of their weaknesses tends to be Toughness 8 high resilience vehicles, and that actually accounts for the Pure Knights win over in the War in the Berg GT, which had just beneath that 5-0 Imperial Knights result 3 Drukhari players going 4-1. Specially crafted combos like the Emperor's Children Noise Marine combo that have profiles that match up very well with how Drukhari work are able to kill them relatively easily as well. The reason that the Noise Marines are able to interact so favorably with them is that Drukhari have very few ways of stopping the Noise Marines from getting the first hit out on them. Because of the layers of combinations you can get onto that Noise Marine squad, they could kill 2 to maybe 3 Drukhari transports in their first volley, then use the Endless Cacophony stratagem to fire again. And if any of those models are still out in the open after those transports are destroyed and the disembarks are performed, the second shot from the Noise Marines will kill almost everything inside those raiders as well. Not to mention that, but because of Music of the Apocalypse allowing the unit to fire when they die, and the fact that a Strength 4 gun with a set of abilities supporting it to make it very consistent and a relatively high volume is good at killing almost anything in the Drukhari army once it jumps out of its transport, means that the unit is very difficult to engage into. As long as you make sure that the Noise Marines can't get engaged on turn 1 by some fast Drukhari units, or they don't get shot by something like liquefier guns, they're going to be able to warp time out of their hidey hole, blow up 400 to 500 points of the Drukhari army, and be very difficult to interact with on the swing back, allowing you to sort of swing the game from there. I'm sure more special technology like that will begin to make appearances in the metagame as it shapes up further, but the big downside of Drukhari remaining essentially untouched after the FAQ is that factions without access to that technology that will just have to bring their basic builds into a Drukhari matchup are going to be essentially competitively unviable as long as Drukhari continues to get more popular, which, unless they're nerfed, they absolutely will. With it now essentially confirmed that Drukhari will remain unchanged, at least for the foreseeable future, that puts them squarely in their rightful place at the very tippy top of the 40k metagame, second only to the faction that has lorded over the rest of us since the bowels of 8th edition. Which is Admak, by the way. It's Admak. It's not Space Marines. I'll do a video on why we should stop saying that Space Marines are broken. That's ridiculous. But it's Adeptus Mechanicus. I don't want there to be any confusion. It certainly helps that Adeptus Mechanicus probably has the most consistent Drukhari matchup in the game, given that they are a faction composed entirely of emotionless death robots bristling with an array of near-purpose-built Drukhari killing weaponry, most of which is mounted on the totality of Renaissance Italy's air power, a unit type that Drukhari specifically has trouble interacting with. Now, before we wrap up the video, I wanted to take a moment to talk about Adeptus Mechanicus specifically. A lot of people point towards Admech's often mediocre win rates as evidence of the fact that the faction is actually very balanced and everything is fine. But what holds Admech down in in-person games isn't actually the power of the faction or the units inside it, it's just the expense of the faction. The most optimal Admech builds cost anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 US, well out of range of the pocketbook of most hobbyists. So Admech players have to settle for relying on less optimal units, which in turn drops their win rate down to a more mediocre level. But the Admech Air Wing style of list, which typically consists of triple Stratoraptors plus triple Fusiliers backed up by Iron Strider Ballistarii or Scorpius Disintegrators alongside several units of Cerberus Raiders and their utility, are uninteractable by most of the factions in the game, and even if they're in danger of actually dying, can trivially alpha strike almost any list off the table if they're allowed to go first. To my knowledge, the archetype doesn't actually sport any bad matchups at the moment, and has at least a solid chance into any other popular list. We saw them get to the finals of Motor City and lose only to Vital Intelligence, which has a penchant for handing the win directly to the first player regardless of the matchup being played on it, and likely would have won the event were it not for that mission selection. I'm glad that the in-person game is finally getting to witness how absolutely ludicrously efficient Adeptus Mechanicus builds can become. But if the rumors are true that Admech points values are not being adjusted when their new codex arrives, don't expect that paradigm to change anytime soon. I'm definitely not the first person to voice their fear that Admech receiving almost strictly stat buffs in their new unit previews raises the concern that they will simply become more mathematically effective, and that should they not be reworked, the 40k metagame will quickly become a host of Drukhari and Admech armies preying on anyone unfortunate enough not to own one of those two factions. GW has had an absolutely great track record of their designs in 9th edition, with a lot of mechanically unique and very balanced codex releases seeing release. After the fiasco that was the power level of 8th edition's Marine codexes in late 2019, the paradigm shift was a really good one to see, and 9th edition 40k has been in a very healthy state for the last few months. Outside Admech, of course, they haven't changed at all since the release of 9th edition. As long as you don't see too many Admech players, almost everybody has a good chance to win an event that they show up at. But if Drukhari are the new normal, and we should be expecting codices in that 8th edition Marine style in the future, I have little hope for the integrity of 9th edition in the foreseeable future. So anyway, that's all I have to say about it today. I did really want to touch on some of my thoughts from the results of last edition, as well as the metagame going forward. Things are looking very interesting outside of these outliers that are Admak and Drukhari. If those are brought down to a more reasonable level, if we can bring the top factions in the game down to a 55, maybe 60% win rate at the highest, everything else in the game exists in a relatively tight band from the 45 to 55% win rate range, which is extremely healthy. A lot of factions in the game have pretty bad matchups into random stuff, and that makes for a really interesting and dynamic metagame. And we can see that in a lot of these 4-in-1 results. There's a little bit of an overperformance of Sororitas lists. That's to be expected, given how powerful they are. And obviously, once you ignore those and the Drukhari lists that were incredibly prevalent in 4-in-1, we saw a lot of different lists take the fore. In Motor City Mayhem, we saw some crazy things like 4-in-1 Deathwatch lists, Space Wolves, other Space Marine archetypes like White Scars. Chaos lists are doing incredibly well in that 4-in-1 bracket, not just Death Guard, which also have a pretty decent matchup into Drukhari, but very interesting Chaos Soup lists, bringing some of the most powerful, big, scary monsters and demons from the different Chaos subfactions and jamming them together in one list for some big kaiju battle action. We're also seeing Orcs do relatively well, with Death Skulls and Evil Suns list putting up a lot of 4-in-1 results this weekend. And in that Olympus Games GT, a Death Skulls triple kill tank list fighting the Harridan for the top spot, which is a phenomenal finals game that I absolutely love. I'm just so upset that we didn't see any corrective action taken to this Drukhari Codex, and while definitely we're going to see its win rates drop, we've already seen some good technology being implemented over the last weekend to try to combat them. They are still so mathematically powerful that a lot of factions, and especially players who aren't necessarily hyper prepared for the metagame, are going to have absolutely no answer for them. I really hope Drukhari is just an outlier, and this is the one faction where GW maybe just missed the boat a little bit, wanted to give them a big glow up and make it very exciting for people, and maybe you turned them up to 11 instead of 10.5. But given all the previews we've been seeing about Adeptus Mechanicus getting D3+3 damage weapons, getting armor save improvements and toughness improvements almost across the board, I don't know if that's entirely the case, especially since a lot of people are saying that the scuttlebutt is the MFM points costs are the final points cost for the new Adeptus Mechanicus Codex. I don't really want to exist in a metagame where Adeptus Mechanicus just gets stat buffs and maybe lose some stratagems for no change to their points cost. That's going to be absolutely disgusting. But anyway, thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Bit of a rambly one today. I hope everyone enjoyed this style. And if you like this style of metagame breakdown, let me know, and I'll do more of it because it's fun. This is stuff I like talking about. Anyway, big thanks to everybody who supports the channel. YouTube channel members, you can join them down below. Patrons, you can join at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise. And also want to throw a quick shout out to my Twitch subscribers. I stream over there at twitch.tv/tacticaltortoisetv almost every day, a couple times a week. Let's say 3 times a week on average. Whenever games are scheduled, I'll stream my own games, I'll stream some commentary. It's a good time. Come hang out. Also, thanks for watching all the way to the very end of the video, the true ending of the video, as it were. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.